Views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the producer and those appearing in the show and do not necessarily represent the views of DerryCam, the Town of Derry, or any of its staff or affiliates. Hi, I'm Anthony Henry. Welcome back to America's Ass. We're on episode 75. I finally got the number right. I think it's 3 shows in a row where I got the number wrong, at least 3 this season, so finally got it right. And 75 is a pretty good number. We're almost at 100. We're 25 away. So I'm here with 2 very special guests, the House Majority Leader, Jason Osborne, and the Deputy Majority Leader, Joe Sweeney. So thank you for coming on. Please introduce yourself to anyone who doesn't know you. Start with Jason.
Good afternoon, Anthony. Thank you for having me. I'm Jason Osborne. I represent the towns of Auburn, Candia, and Deerfield. I've been in the legislature since 2014, and it's a pleasure to be here to celebrate your 75th episode. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anthony, again, great to be here. Joe Sweeney, I represent the town of Salem. I've done a few terms. I think I'm on my 5th term now, but just great to be here. So congratulations on 75. And I like this setting in this format because usually when Jason and I sit next to each other, we're much closer together in the House of Reps. So like this is a good distance for us to be sitting apart from each other.
I'm surprised you didn't tell me to sit in the middle.
Yeah, no, that would be cruel.
All right, so we had several elections last night. By the time this comes out, this will be coming out sometime this weekend, but we're filming this on a Wednesday. Yesterday we had an election in New York City, in Virginia, in New Jersey, and a few here in New Hampshire, some of which have big impacts on the state. So we saw Mark Tremblay win for the special election in Berlin. We saw a mixed bag in Manchester. Jay Ruwe held his mayor's seat, but Republicans, they didn't really have the majority in the first place on the Board of Aldermen, but they lost that. I think it's 14-0 on the Manchester School Board. We did flip the Laconia mayor's seat. Mike Bordas won that. And we lost the Rochester mayor's seat. So what do we think this is all gonna look like?
Well, it's a good day not to live in New York City. That's for sure. And I think the governor did a good job of letting folks know in New York that they're welcome here in New Hampshire if they need to escape communism and come do business here.
Yeah, I think, it's almost the tale as old as time when you look at New York City, New Jersey, Virginia. You have these great states that in large part Republicans built, and then Republicans moved out of them, moved out of the cities, moved out of those states. Democrats took over, and then, the name of the show is America's Ass, so I'm going to say this. They just turn the cities and states to shit when the Democrats take it over. Republicans move to other states. Republicans are moving en masse to states like New Hampshire, Florida, Texas, where we are becoming more Republican. Last night's elections results in Berlin were great. We won the state rep special. We won the city council in Berlin. We kicked out long-serving Democrats from the Berlin City Council. That was a huge turnout operation where we got Republicans out to vote. We got unaffiliated voters who lean Republican to get out and vote. I think it's, worth mentioning that the other places in the state that had elections last night are already more Democrat to begin with than the rest of the state is. So it was a big win by Jay Ruwe in Manchester. Wasn't shocked about the Board of Aldermen and the school board races just because that's typically where it lies in Manchester. And I think, like you said, we picked up one in Laconia that we can brag about. We lost the mayor's seat in Rochester. Some things are just cyclical. Some things just kind of go in the reverse direction of what the party in power has. Sometimes it motivates the other party's voters to get out and vote a little bit more. But the good thing about New Hampshire is outside of Nashua, most things are every 2 years. So if people in Manchester or Rochester start getting really mad about the direction that their boards and committees are going under, they have an opportunity in 2 years to change it again.
So why do you think we saw some, but not all success, but some success here in New Hampshire, but not elsewhere nationwide?
I think New Hampshire Republicans have a much better brand because we're actually doing what we say we're going to deliver on. I think in other states we saw a lot of their messaging and a lot of their pitches weren't so much about like why they should be elected, but why you shouldn't elect the other guy. Which, I work in political advertising. There's definitely a healthy role as to why you shouldn't elect the other guy. But you got to make the pitch for your candidate. You got to give people a reason to vote for the Republican team, vote for your candidate. We certainly did that up in Berlin with Mark Tremblay, who's a great candidate. He's going to be a great state rep. It's just you gotta give people that like why they're going to go out and vote. Especially on a local election day when it's 15% of voters, 7.5% of the community gets to decide where that community's going. You got to be able to convince 7.6% of your town to take your direction on a day where they're likely not going to want to go out and vote. But I do just think we have a better brand in New Hampshire, and I think we're getting people in the mode of recognizing not only are we continuing to expand our registration advantage when it comes to party reg in the state, but we're just constantly delivering results. I mean, we've done things the last 4 years in the legislature, even when we had a split House with 202 to 198, the amount of conservative things we were able to get through in the budget and just a separate legislation, and the things that we were able to do this year, really against all odds and against expectations, we're delivering on that conservative libertarian agenda, and people are recognizing it, and people are supporting it in the state.
Well, and then you have to be able to willing to put in the work too.
Yeah.
What we did in Berlin was just it was a combination of so many different people all working together and rowing in the same direction to get that done. And we still only pulled it off by 14 votes, right? So if any one person lays down on the job and doesn't come through, we would have lost that election entirely.
I always get very mad when people say my vote doesn't count, because in New Hampshire it does. We have had several town council and school board races decided by 10 votes or less here.
Well, remember how many recounts we had after the 2022 election, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was 26 recounts?
26
For
recounts.
state rep races.
I mean, we're talking margins in which like a text message hitting a spam filter for a carrier could decide the election.
Yeah.
Or whether or not maybe that text message is what hits, like what finally drives 10 people to go out and vote, or reminds them that, hey, especially in like a midterm year or a presidential year, that they need to vote down ballot. And if we don't get those, if that text doesn't hit, if that mailer doesn't hit, if that door's not knocked, then we're going to lose those elections. And it would look like a very different state today. I think the metric we were always talking about after 22, when it was such a tight majority, is that a flip of 500 votes in either direction statewide was the difference between 290 House Republicans or 160 House Republicans. Like, that's how many seats came down to like 10, 15 votes. And when we added them up, if we just flipped them that way, we would have been in a much better position.
So how do you think the New York City mayor election, well, first of all, what do you think New York City will look like in the next 4 years? Do you think it will be as bad as they say it will? And what effect do you think that'll have on elections nationwide over the next decade or so?
I tend to think that probably not a lot is going to change, right? I mean, yes, they elected a nutbag, but he's also someone who really doesn't know how government works and won't be able to actually make the kinds of changes that he's interested in seeing. So I suspect that I think New York will survive.
New York City is a beast as an institution, as a machine. It's going to be difficult for, especially the changes that he's looking to do. They're not going to have an immediate impact. The worst thing about government is how long it takes for things to happen, in the sense that it'll be when there's another mayor in the future, whether it's a Republican mayor or a moderate Democrat mayor, they're going to be picking up the pieces of the Zoran impacts at that point. I mean, we're still dealing with issues from Joe Biden being president. The affordability crisis is still from Joe Biden, but now Democrats are painting all these price hikes and property tax issues on the Republicans that are in control now. All of the seeds for that were planted when the Democrats were in control, and we're just doing everything we can as quickly as we can to fight that back and put it back in the box. So I look at it like, he's going to make every bus in the city free. That'll probably that'll shift the homeless population from taking the subway to taking the buses. And so then people are going to feel like the subways are a little safer. But then he's going to defund the police. And then the subway, it's all going to just level out again. but it'll take a few years for it to happen because a lot of his proposals, and this was not something that he would talk about in his TikTok videos or any of his ads, a lot of his proposals, he actually needs the state legislature in New York to approve because he wants to make the corporate tax rate in New York City the same as New Jersey, which is just like, it's like third grade like government of like you're playing The Sims and you're like, oh, I could set the tax rate as much as my neighbor and that's going to be fine. And then you don't factor in all the other costs of doing business in New York compared to New Jersey and how it all kind of washes out in the end. It would have been a great night for New Jersey if they elected Jack Citarelli, because then New Jersey could have reaped so much benefit from people fleeing New York City. I do think you'll see population movements out of New York over the next year. The tough thing is if you're a upper middle class or middle class family and you're in New York City, sure, you want to leave anywhere. Who are you going to sell your house to? Who are you going to sell your condo unit to? Maybe you're renting, maybe you can get out of your lease. But a lot of people that are of the type that we would probably want to see move to a state like New Hampshire or Florida or Texas, it's going to be really tough for them to sell that asset that they have. But then again, it's like, you know, the Hudson Yards redevelopment of like 30 acres with all the towers that they're building, that's still going to move forward. JP Morgan just built their new office tower. Jamie Dimon's not going to leave New York City because of a 4-year mayor term. But I do think it sets New York on the trend for future decline. Doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't happen like one election and it's done. But every election matters, so vote in every single one. But I think gradually over time we'll see it start to unravel a little bit.
So a few shows ago, I had one of your Democratic colleagues on, Jared Sullivan, and him and I actually talked about something I heard, I think it was on the Ben Shapiro show actually, where he posited this theory that elected officials are a response to the previous incumbent. So Obama was a response to Bush. Bush was a response to Clinton, etc. I believe that'll be the same in New York City. Adams was controversial in his own way. I think Zoran was a response to that. We might not like the response, but for those voters, it was a response. And I think after Zoran, there will be another response to him. I think it'll be a little more favorable toward us.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Eric Adams because Eric Adams was a response to Bill de Blasio,
Yeah.
who we all thought was just a failure, and he was like the most socialist candidate that had ever run in New York City before. And Bill de Blasio was a response to Bloomberg, who had started off as a Republican and became an independent that really liked to regulate people's lives. And then Bloomberg was sort of starting a continuation of Rudy Giuliani. But yeah, I agree. I think I heard one pundit say that Zoran Mandami is what we feared Bill de Blasio was going to be, right? Like he's actually going to do a lot of the things that we assumed that de Blasio was going to do. But it's no secret that I think it's the Democrat establishment getting what they wish for. Obviously in New York, Governor Hochul went after Eric Adams pretty hard, and they started throwing everything against him that they could. And I don't know the specifics as to what he allegedly did and what he didn't do. I know he was a former cop, so I kind of get like, it seems a little challenging that he would skirt the lines as much as they say he did. But Kathy Hochul wanted to get rid of Eric Adams. I think the Democrat establishment thought it was going to be an Andrew Cuomo or someone like him that was going to win the Democrat primary and just going to move on from it. Now they got to live with what they've got. And I do think electorally, voters in New York City might be on the Zoran train, but I think it's going to be a very easy picture for every Republican candidate to paint next November that their Democrat opponent is just an acolyte of Zoran Mandami. And that if they're not actively calling him out and they're not actively opposing his efforts, you know, it's our nation's largest city. It's hard to just, you can't wipe that away. It's not, you know, a small town in Iowa that we can just forget about. It's such an integral part of our lives that once the stuff starts coming out from what he's doing, he'll get so much media coverage that we'll be able to paint every Democrat as a Zoran Mandami. And they're going to have to live with it.
And I think we can benefit too, assuming that comes up here.
Yeah.
So speaking of up here, it's not often I get two of the leading policymakers in the whole state on my show, So obviously can't reveal much of what's going to happen next year in the House, but let's have a sneak peek. Is there anything exciting that you can talk about that'll be coming to the floor next year?
And do we have any bills written out of?
I've gotten a
drafting
few
yet?
back, but there's a lot in works. I think a common theme that we'll see next year is we're going to take a lot of different ways to take on the affordability crisis head on. And whether that's fighting for ways to deliver property tax relief, reduce future increases in property taxes for people, really sort of get a handle on the local property tax situation that we've had, but also ways that we're going to lower energy costs through free market solutions, and just make things more affordable. Like energy costs is a big one, because if you make energy more affordable for folks, everything else in the supply chain becomes more affordable. And you'll see that kind of trickle through the entire economy to bring down costs for folks and to make it easier for people to live. But I think property taxes and really reining that in is going to be big. I don't know if Jason has anything on that he wants to.
Yeah, look, you always know what people care about because both sides are messaging on the same thing. So you'll hear Republicans and you'll hear Democrats talking about affordability, cost of living. What really cracks me up is listening to the Democrats talk about how they are for freedom, and they're adopting that language out of the Republicans because they know that that's what people want, and what they fail to understand it's that freedom is what brings that cost of living down. It enables people to provide for their family and conduct business and engage in commerce. What were you saying?
Yeah, I think it's always funny though with Democrats, especially in the legislature, because they've been out of power for so long, they don't even know what they're talking about anymore. We had a great example last week in House Finance, where there was this program that would essentially create a spreadsheet for all the towns and cities and counties in the state to identify what land that the local government owns. Because the worst kept secret about New Hampshire is even the state government, the county governments, and the local municipal governments, the school boards, there's no great database that shows all the government-owned land in the state of New Hampshire. We obviously know the big tracts of land, but there's been so much land bought up over the years of from road expansions where governments own a ton of acres of land that are theoretically developable, but nobody knows about it. So anyway, there's this program that was going to create a spreadsheet, which we did in the state budget. We created the spreadsheet so that we can start tracking all the government-owned land that we have in the state. And the Democrats wanted to hire an administrator to help administer the program. Again, it's a spreadsheet. We don't need to do that. So in House Finance, we were recommending to ITL the bill. The Democrats start talking in the committee room about how they have visited buildings and developments that were funded with these funds that we were killing. And I paused, and after a couple of Democrats had made the same pitch about how affordable housing is so important and all of this stuff, and we have visited these buildings that were built with this program, I chimed in. I was like, this program has never existed before. And even if it did, it wouldn't be funding any sort of housing construction. So if you visited a development that was built by these funds, it's a miracle that it exists. And the Democrats are like, well, I didn't mean this program specifically. It's like, what are we talking about here? They are such a party that is they don't focus in on the actual policy details. They look at the name of it and it's just like, oh, this is like a partners in housing program. So they assume first off, they assume that a subsidy makes something more affordable, which is just a fallacy of the highest order. The things that we can do to make things more affordable is to make it easier for permitting processes to go through, reducing the red tape that we have in state government. That will actually bring affordability to the housing market. A subsidy is just going to shift the dollars from one source to another and not actually create anything more affordable. An affordable unit costs just as much to build as a market rate unit. We should be focusing our attention on what we can do, what things that we can cut in terms of regulations, with the supply chain, with the cost of energy. I mean, steel, the price of steel is like 60% what the cost of energy is to produce the steel. So everything that we can do to bring more energy online and actually start producing things in the state again, that will enable affordable housing in a market direction, not with government subsidies. I don't know how I got on that topic. It's just a pet peeve of mine, but it's just there's so many well-meaning people. And I do think even the Democrats, I think, are well-meaning. We just disagree on how to get there. And it's important to, when we're actually talking about affordability, we're actually talking about making lives easier for people. A government program is not going to do it. A subsidy is not going to do it. We just need to find ways to get the government out of the way, and people are going to amaze us with what they can do with more freedom.
Well, on every issue, that's the same story between Republicans and Democrats, right? You got one worldview is that government can solve problems by taking some people's money and just throwing it at other people. Where Republicans understand that government is typically the problem, and we need to figure out how to get it out of the way so that people can live their own lives. I mean, look at the industries that are bankrupting society the most: healthcare, education. Those are the ones that government controls the most. Meanwhile, consumer electronics, government really doesn't have much to say about that. DVD player, when it first came out, how many hundreds of dollars were those? You know, $700, $800. Now you can get one for basically for free. But imagine what would have happened if government had taken over the DVD industry, and we'd still be paying $800 for. Or actually, the price probably would have gone up. They'd probably be $8,000, and it would be the same unit. We never would have had any progress.
So on education, the last couple of years, you've had a lot of big strides. We going to see anything else next year that's exciting?
Yes. so you say big strides, but again, we're just chipping away at a giant iceberg of the monstrosity of a problem that is just escalated over time. Right?
Yeah.
We didn't get to this point overnight to where budgets keep climbing and climbing and climbing. Enrollment is dropping and dropping and dropping, and performance is dropping and dropping and dropping.
Yeah, so during our mic check, we were talking about dairy. So as the viewers know, I am in my second year on the Fiscal Advisory Committee for the school district. We had a meeting last night, and we discovered that, and again, we can still cut some if, the committee wants to. We're up, I think, 10.8% as opposed to last year. We're going from about 104 million to 115 million. It's a big jump, and I think a lot of it's because of the bonds that they pushed and the new teacher's contract and things like that. But 10%'s a lot for any town, especially Derry.
Do you, off the top of your head, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you know what enrollments look like in the school district?
Dropping.
Oh, really? Weird. It's like a trend.
Dropping not
Everywhere.
only in K through 8, but sending to Pinkerton.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any program that caused them to leave the school district that was failing them.
It might be a little bit of that, but it's just the population trends.
Yeah.
Where there's just, because there's been a lot of anti-family zoning policies over the years, and that affordability crisis has led to less families having children, more families having less children, whatever, less kids. There's less kids, less people are being born, which has like a 12 to 18 year impact down the line, where there's now less students. The schools are machines, and they still require the same input, if not more, every year to keep that machine running, regardless of how many actual students they're teaching. I like to always ask, we're spending, between $20,000 to $30,000 per student. You have a classroom of, let's say it's 10 students. That's $200,000. I know the teacher's not getting $200,000 a year. Where is that money going? Like, even if the ratio is one teacher for every 12 students, where is that money going in every school district? The money that's not going to the classroom to actually teach the student, all of that should be reviewed, audited, really checked in. I think there has been a sensibility over the last few decades where people have wanted to have, they want nice schools for their kids. And I think for a while that option was always it has to be the public school. It's the only way you're going to get nice schools. There's even elements where in town zoning and permitting, there are areas where they'll allow a public school, but they would not allow a private school to operate. Makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. But there's just guardrails that are in there to protect the institutions that these schools are. There's a role for public schools, certainly, but there's a role for competition. Competition is the greatest saving grace. It's the way you get DVD players for free because it just drives that competition. And so, like Jason said, we're just chipping away and making education more of a market and less of a mandate. And that's going to work.
I'll go on record and say EFAs are going to save New Hampshire education in the end.
Yeah, I mean, still, you're only talking about a small number of people, but those small number of people really need that program. So I'm not going to downplay it or anything, but it's not going to be the full solution. At the end of the day, we need a system where every family can choose the education that works best for their child, and we have to decouple the local property taxes from the education funding too, because it makes no sense that the same people who are voting on the school budgets and paying the school budgets are the same people who decide not to let any more people move to town and build things. This is a recipe for the absolute destruction of civilization. So we need to be able to build. We need towns to not be afraid to let children live in their town.
So we are just about out of time, so feel free to end with whatever you want. Start with Joe.
Wow, end with whatever I want. That's very
Closing
dangerous.
statement.
I think I think it's a good time to be in New Hampshire. I think it's a good time for people that aren't in New Hampshire to move to the state of New Hampshire. I think we're trying every day to make it so that this is a state where if you care about liberty, if you care about your ability to make a buck and really provide for your family and do so, we're trying to make this state the easiest state for you to live in and the best state to live in. We constantly rank among the best states in the nation. So I don't think we should be confused when a lot of people want to move to the state. We just need to make sure that we have set it up so we're attracting the right people to move here so that we can keep expanding our advantages and not losing them.
Just this year, with the final repeal of the interest and dividends income tax, New Hampshire moved from number 6 to number 3 in the country for tax policy, and by 2030 we'll be number 1.
Yep, a lot of good things happening in 2030.
Project 2030.
Project 2030. So thank you both for being big change makers in the state. I think a lot of victories we've had in New Hampshire are attributed to our House leaders. So thank you both. From me, hopefully a future homeowner in New Hampshire, someday soon, I should say. And brief little thing from me, as I said, we had our second budget meeting, and we're up 10.8% with the budget. So now's the time to really pay attention if you live in Derry. Our election is in March. I believe sign-ups for running for local office are the third week of January, I think. So start thinking of running. School board, town council, we need people. I'm Anthony Henry. This has been America's Ass. Thank you for watching.